Okay, guys, as usual, the Premier will give her remarks, and then these guys will offer a technical update, and also Dr. Yu is here to answer questions from AHS as well.
All right, thank you very much for coming, and sorry for the brief delay. I have a few updates and a few comments for you this morning, and then, as Cheryl has stated, some specific information that can be provided from officials. So regarding the wildfire situation overall, were 18 new wildfire starts in the forest protection area yesterday. As of 8 a.m. this morning, there were 49 wildfires burning in Alberta, 7 out of control, 12 being held, 23 under control, and 7 that have been turned over to local responders. I want to underline to all Albertans that fire conditions remain extreme in the province, and that several communities are battling wildfires. It's not just Fort McMurray, although without question this is by far the largest and most severely affected community. So we're asking all Albertans to be extremely careful and to do everything that they can to reduce all fire hazards. As we announced yesterday, we've declared a provincial state of emergency. This will help us provide the support that is needed for Albertans who have had to cross municipal boundaries to escape the wildfires. It also means that we can help coordinate the resources needed to fight the fire. On that note, Canada Task Force 2, a group of rescue and logistics specialists, have set up in Fort McMurray to assist the firefighting effort. In terms of evacuations, the communities, as you know, of Fort McMurray, Anzac, Gregoire Lake Estates, the Fort McMurray First Nation are still under an evacuation order. The Mackenzie County area near high level, that evacuation order has been lifted. Overall, more than 80,000 people have been evacuated since Tuesday. These are huge numbers to be dealing with, and it's a challenge to get an exact tally of how many people have been evacuated and where they have gone. Many people have arranged their own accommodations with families and friends, and others are staying at hotels or camping. So we do ask everyone who has been displaced to register with the Red Cross. It's very important that we know that, where people are and that everyone is accounted for. To those people who have been displaced from their homes, I want you to know that we have your back. You will be supported. We will ensure that those receiving benefits and services will be able to continue receiving them. For example, those who receive AISH or Alberta Works benefits by check will be able to get those supports in other ways. Please check our websites for details. We will continue providing 24-hour mental health support through our helpline. In addition, AHS is sending mental health support workers. They are already at the Northlands Reception Centre, and they are either in transit or arriving at Sate, Lac La Biche, the Firebag site north of Fort McMurray, Fort Mackay, and St. Paul. For those Albertans and Canadians who want to help, and there are many of them, the best option is still to get in touch with the Red Cross. They are seeking monetary donations that will go to help shelter, feed, and care for those fleeing this disaster. Albertans can also call 310-4455 with their questions, and we will answer them to the best of our ability. So we have a very difficult road ahead with a lot of uncertainty as these fires continue to burn. But whatever road we face, we will face them together with the support of all citizens across this province. Now, for some additional specifics, I know you'll probably ask about updates on structures within Fort McMurray, and I can say that we're unable to give you an update on numbers at this point because firefighters have been unable to get close enough or to dedicate their time to that particular task. What they have been doing, however, is focusing their efforts in Fort McMurray in protecting key infrastructure and areas. As far as we know, we have an optimistic outlook for the state of both Timberlea and Thickwood, in that it appears as though firefighters were reasonably successful at ensuring that there wasn't tremendous growth of damage in those neighborhoods yesterday. Other key infrastructure areas remain protected throughout most of Fort McMurray. As you would know, the Regional Emergency Operations Center had to move from its place beside the airport to Anzac, and then had to move out of Anzac late yesterday. However, you'll be pleased to know that as of 1 a.m. this morning, it was reestablished by the airport, and tactical reserves from the unit that I described earlier were able to give some relief to the Wood Buffalo Emergency Operations personnel, who I believe have had a chance to get some sleep and are back at work today. The fire has grown to roughly 85,000 hectares in size, so it's large. Just to put it in context somewhat, in 2011, in that area, there was a 600,000 hectare fire. So this is a large fire. But we have dealt with them. The key issue is ensuring that we protect infrastructure and the community, and that is the work that's going on with the firefighters right now, and they will continue to do that work. With respect to evacuation, our latest numbers show that there are roughly 25,000 people who were evacuated north of the city, and our focus right now is on getting those people south as quickly as possible. Right now, we are working in concert with industry to do as much air evacuation as possible, and we are doing everything we can to establish, to open the highway so that we can get fuel up there and then get those folks moving south as quickly as we can. And we will be providing more information on that later today. Overall, with respect to services for the evacuees who are arriving in the centres and in communities across Alberta, there are a number of different issues that we are looking at right now in terms of how to support them, and I will have more to say on that issue later this afternoon. In closing, I want to once again commend the first responders, the emergency management staff who are working day and night in incredibly difficult circumstances to support their community, to fight this fire, and to keep people safe. I had the opportunity to meet with many of those people yesterday when I was up in Fort McMurray, and they are truly heroes. So I'm happy to pass it on to other people for some comments, and then we can take some questions afterwards. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Chad Morrison, a Senior Manager with Wildfire. So I'll give you an update on what happened on the fire as occurred of yesterday. So the wildfire continues to challenge wildfires with extreme wildfire conditions and wildfire behavior. Late yesterday, the wildfire grew rapidly due to the increase of winds. We had winds recorded on site of up to 70 kilometers an hour, and those winds came from the northwest. The fire blew out to the southeast corner late last night, and now, as the Premier said, the fire is estimated to be 85,000 hectares. The winds came from the north and blew south. We had tankers and staff continuing to work with the municipal fire department in the northwest, protecting critical infrastructure here. The extreme fire behavior that happened through late in the day and overnight. This is where the growth is in this area here, to the southeast. It had begun to create its own weather, even creating its own high winds yesterday, and even lightning was coming from the smoke clouds that it created. The fire has ran past the airport and our tanker base and warehousing facilities, but my understanding at this point is both those structures are still intact. From a wildfire perspective, we still continue to have 100 firefighters on the ground, 10 helicopters. We'll have at least 16 air tankers deployed today, if not more, protecting that critical infrastructure. We'll continue to work with the numerous other municipal firefighters, and Scott will continue to give an update on that. We also have more firefighters and tankers on the way from other provinces across the country. Quebec is sending 4 air tankers, which should arrive sometime today. Another 100 firefighters are coming in from Ontario. And as we continue to get more information from our partners, we continue to have more firefighters coming in the coming days. The central focus for today for our firefighters is continue to support the municipal folks and the structural firefighters on scene to protect the community and the critical infrastructure out there. today, we're expecting the fire to continue to challenge firefighters. Even though the temperature is going to be lower, around 16 degrees, we're still going to have very low humidities and the conditions are still tinder dry. We're going to have very strong winds from the northwest, up to 40 kilometers an hour. We expect the fire to continue to grow in the southeast corner, but it'll be blowing away from the community. And at this point, it continues to burn outside in the forested areas, and I'll turn it over to Scott for an update of any of the municipal side of things at this point.
Morning, Scott Long, Executive Director, Operations, Alberta Emergency Management Agency. Quick update. As the Premier mentioned, CAN Task Force 2, which is part of the Heavy Urban Search and Rescue organization based out of Calgary, dispatched 2 incident management teams. They're the command and control elements that enable the ground forces to do what they need to do. They arrived at 1 o'clock last night, linked up with the Regional Emergency Operations Center that had been displaced temporarily from south of Anzac due to fire threat. The experts on the ground, firefighters, experts, made the decision that it was safe to move back up to fire station number 5 within the community. They've done so, and they effected command and control as of last night. This morning, 77 more community firefighters or structural firefighters from communities around the province arrived to augment the firefighters who are currently in place. Right now, we are looking at well over 200 structural firefighters and 25 engines in the community of Fort McMurray dealing with protecting critical infrastructure. As Chad mentioned as well, there was a period of time we were concerned about the airport, and that was briefed yesterday. Again, due to monumental efforts of wildfire fighters and structural firefighters, their defensive efforts worked yesterday, so mild damage to the airport. It remains open for aviation and limited transport use. We plan on using that today to land food, water, and resupplies for the first responders using a DND asset. Further, based on the numbers that we received this morning and the Premier briefed on, 25,000 evacuees in camps to the north. Had a conversation, or a meeting, I should say, with a joint oil and gas industry emergency coordination center with representatives from all of the major players there, Enbridge, Noralta, CNRL, Suncor, and others. Great work, great cooperation, great collaboration, and excellent work in terms of opening their doors and facilities for these displaced Albertans. Right now, we are trying to implement the transport of 8,000 evacuees from the north to the south via air, starting this afternoon in conjunction with industry resources and D&D resources. At the same time, we're doing an overflight of Highway 63 through the community of Fort McMurray, and as soon as we determine that it is safe to do so, we will coordinate ground movement as well. First step would be to move a mobile gas station, if you will, from Ministry of Transportation to move north, make sure that everybody got the fuel they need, and then we will, in a control manner, start moving ground transport to the south to get most of the evacuees to the preferred locations in Edmonton, Calgary, where we have better support needs for them. There is one search and rescue mission that was active this morning using D&D assets, reported through social media of a possible individual east of Fort McMurray and an ATV. We were not sure if it was confirmed or not, but we're going to take all of those things seriously. RCMP and D&D joint operation dispatch search and rescue assets. To this point in time, nothing has been found, and that is ongoing. Thank you.
So we'll take questions from the floor and questions from the phone. I just want to warn you guys, we do have a number of questions on the phone, and I know you guys have a lot of questions as well, so we'll take as many as we can before these guys have to get back to work, okay?
Can you tell us more about the airlift? Where the plane's going to come from, what kind of planes, where the people being taken to?
Right now, sir, those details are all being worked, but I can tell you that our industry partners have aviation assets. They are prepared and committed aiding us in the transport of evacuees starting today, and we're working rapidly towards that. We also have D&D assets, so we have a CJ-130 Hercules aircraft which can land in fairly austere areas. We're looking to transport medical supplies to the north, and at the same time we are going to start shuttling people back that want to head towards the south, and the primary destination would be Edmonton and the reception centers we're establishing here.
Why is it necessary to move people out of the camps in the north? Are they running out of supplies there, or?
No, as a matter of fact, there's still supplies, but in terms of emergency social services supports, the better locations are in the south. We have access to better support systems for displaced personnel.
The military right now, I understand that they have to be asked by the province to go in on the ground. There are 350 troops ready. When are you going to be asking for those guys to come in?
Right now, this is a precautionary as well. The military want to be ready at a moment's notice if we do have to call them in. They are conducting their basic wildfire fighting package as we speak to make sure that, and it takes a day to do, so they're doing that training. But right now, the wildfire fighters have more than significant reserves, and they can call upon other provinces and what have you, and I believe they are. Chad can talk to that. So until we've completely used up, exhausted those resources, we would not call on the Department of National Defense for boots on the ground unless it's in extremis. Chad, do you want to talk to the numbers?
Sure. Yeah, we currently have over 1,000 firefighters in the province fighting all the new starts that the Premier talked about, but we also have them set to move in as soon as need be based on the needs of the team and the fire. As you guys can see, that the fire environment is extremely challenging and very dynamic. Things are continuing to change day by day, not just day by day, but hour by hour. We expect to see more growth later on today, and so we are continuing to support and concentrate on the critical infrastructure pieces, and then once we are safe to get into the wildfire components out in the forested areas, once the town has been secured, we'll then continue to deploy additional forest firefighting resources out there.
Can you just clarify the numbers that came out this morning, the 49 fires, the 7 or whatever, is that province-wide or is that just for?
Province-wide, yes.
Any further word on a cause or? No?
So a mixture of causes at this point. The majority of causes that we'll see at this time of year generally are human-caused fires, so that's why we want all Albertans to take extreme caution and care when out in any part of Alberta because of the dry conditions and the dry spring we've had. We're also into lightning season now too, so we're starting to see some lightning fires occur, but the majority of them are human-caused wildfires that are really 100% preventable.
This one, still don't know?
This one currently, right now, at this time, is under investigation. We should know in the next few days of where it's at. It did start in a remote forested area, so there's a possibility it could be lightning, so we want to make sure that we check that and complete that investigation.
In terms of the evacuation call, we're starting to hear more people question when it came through, and I don't know if you want to address this, Chad, and perhaps the Premier, people saying that, it's fantastic there's been no loss of life directly related to the fire, but they may not have received the evacuation order on time. Some are saying they should have got it sooner. How confident are you that the evacuation order, the major ones at Fort McMurray, were made at the right time?
Scott, I'll let you speak to that.
As we've seen over the last 48 hours, wildfires are very unpredictable, very dynamic situations. I know from being in the Provincial Operations Centre from the start, the community of Wood Buffalo erred on the side of caution. They issued precautionary evacuation notices, put people on evacuation notices, and I thought that the evacuation notices and the mandatory evacuation notices were done as efficiently and as effectively as possible, given the changing dynamic nature of that wildfire. As you can see, it can turn on a dime and it can move relatively rapidly.
Premier Knockley, if I can ask a question, how come you waited yesterday afternoon to declare a state of emergency when we knew on Tuesday 80,000 people were being evacuated and we knew houses were burning? Why wait so long? What's the criteria there?
Well, the criteria really are about, I mean, the way these things work is you begin by deferring to the regional emergency responders who are in place at that time. And as I was very clear to say yesterday, and will say again today, the regional emergency responders through the municipality of Wood Buffalo did a very excellent job. And so, to be clear, we were working alongside them throughout that time, but they were really the lead. And so, it's really at the point when you manage to get, when all these other people start arriving in other places outside of the municipality where you need to start looking at authorities with respect to that, as well as the declaration outside of High Level and also Lac St. Anne. So we started seeing other problems outside of just that municipality. So we had been looking at it all along, but it was a question of looking at the Wood Buffalo being the lead, and then looking at the point at which they were ready to have our emergency coordination experts come in and take a leadership role. So I think that all the work that needed to be done at the time was being done by the right people, and I think that the transition is now better because we are now, and timely, because we're in a position to coordinate interjurisdictionally, both within the province as well as outside.
Premier, have you started to think about, and we know from previous disasters in Slave Lake and in the Calgary floods, there's often a very substantial cost for the recovery efforts and even the disaster relief efforts. Have you started to think about what those costs will mean for the province's budget, and are you looking at changing that budget at all?
What we're looking at right now still, our primary focus is the safety of the town, the safety of the residents of the town, and ensuring that the evacuation is done in a way that gets people out safely and then has them secured safely once they've evacuated. So that piece is not completely finished yet, and our focus is on the recovery, the support efforts. The next phase is about the support efforts for the evacuees. Absolutely, going forward, we're going to have to look at it. I mean, when you get into recovery phase, there's a number of complex issues. We'll be having conversations with the federal government on that issue. But what you have to first do is get on the ground and assess the extent of the damage. One of the things that's been well done thus far is the efforts of our firefighters to protect key infrastructure. That ultimately has a major impact on the recovery costs down the road between the various levels of government and insurers. And so that's what a lot of work's been going on to ensure that the recovery can go along faster if the key infrastructure pieces are still in play, like the water treatment plant, like the hospital, like major transportation corridors. Yesterday we had tankers, air tankers, actually water bombing residential neighborhoods to protect those neighborhoods and to protect the infrastructure inside those neighborhoods. So that's the focus right now. The cost analysis will come once the emergency part of the disaster has ended and we're able to go in and evaluate what we're looking at.
I know in previous disasters, the government's handed out loaded debit cards to evacuees. Is that something you're looking at for this situation?
We are looking at a broad range of supports for evacuees, and as I've said, you can expect to hear more from us on that later today.
Now, if we've got 20,000 people north of Fort McMurray and we're looking at flying out 8,000, what about the other 12? What's how do we reconcile?
Well, I think at the end of the day, what we're looking at really is doing everything we can to open up the ground routes south, getting fuel up to the folks who are in the various camps, because a lot of them didn't have fuel and weren't able to go south when the road was open, which it was for parts of yesterday and all that kind of stuff. And so if we can get the fuel up there, then the primary means of evacuation, just as we did for the vast majority of evacuees, is for them to drive south. So we need to get them fuel up there and then get them south. And in the meantime, when we're waiting on that, we're also, they're doing what I understand is a prioritized airlift for those who most need to leave for reasons of vulnerability or other issues.
Mr. Long, maybe a question for you, or for probably yourself. When you talk about protecting key infrastructure, I'm wondering if there's been a cost in terms of people's homes. Were resources, redeployed from one neighborhood or area at the expense of, say, protecting the airport?
I can answer. The initial days of the wildfire or the interface fire, some of these communities, Beacon Hill, et cetera, waterways, they were impacted upon immediately. So at that point in time, there were decisions that were made with regards to reallocating resources, but I think you'll see yesterday, and you can reflect it on the map, that in the communities of Timberley and Thickwood, yesterday there were constant drops of water and retardant onto those communities to protect them from as much as possible from the spread of the fire. At the same time, there's enough resources there that we are not only looking after the critical infrastructure, we are also doing our best to make sure that there is no further damage done to the residences. Absolutely, we have enough resources to do that, but clearly, as the Premier said, protecting the downtown core, government offices, hospitals will really aid in everything that has to follow up.
We're going to go to the phone lines now. Operator, please put through the first caller.
Your first question comes from Chris Varco from Calgary Herald. Chris, your line is open.
Hi, Premier. Thanks for taking my call. Two questions. First off, you said you're still assessing the damage. Can you give us a sense, though, of the scale of what you're hearing and what you're seeing? And is the prediction that this will be worse than Slave Lake or the southern Alberta flooding in terms of the scale of damage?
Well, I think we certainly don't want to get into unfounded projections because I don't think that's helpful for any discussion. What I can say that we know definitively is that ultimately with the Slave Lake fire, we were looking at around between 300 and 400 structures that were destroyed, and we know as of yesterday morning that we were looking at about 1,600 in Fort McMurray. So we know it's of course it's much bigger, but really at the end of the day, I think it would be irresponsible to start making projections until we can take the time to have boots on the ground, which are focused on doing that evaluation and that assessment. And that's what we will do when it's safe. Right now, the focus is exactly as Scott was describing. It's on protecting the neighborhoods, protecting the city and the infrastructure from the fire, and then we'll get into the assessment of the damage once it's safe to do so.
Okay. You've had a chance, obviously, to probably communicate with the finance department and talk to oil companies, and I'm wondering, do you have a sense of what kind of economic impact this is going to have upon the province? It sounds like obviously several 100,000 barrels of oil production have been shut in, and I'm just wondering if you have a sense here on how this is going to impact the economy in the days moving ahead.
Well, I think there's going to be a number of different factors that impact on the economy. I think that, what we're hearing right now, and so far so good, is that the infrastructure and the capital for oil and gas production remains pretty much unaffected. And what's slowing down their production right now is the fact that, for good reason, their employees are not there right now. And so, as things stand now, the industry will be well positioned to ramp back up once the fire is under control. So at that time, we'll have to. So really, the extent of the issue that you're identifying, Chris, is going to come down to how long it takes for people to be able to return to work, in and around Fort McMurray.
Operator, please put through the next caller.
Your next question comes from Nia Williams from Reuters. Nia, your line is open.
Hi. Does Alberta have any kind of disaster plan for protecting the oil sands, and has it been activated?
Do you want to speak to that? We have a joint committee, and of course, each mine has very extensive resources that they have in place themselves, and both in terms of human as well as equipment, and then of course there's coordinating efforts. And I don't know, Scott, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Operator, please put through the next caller.
Your next question comes from the line of Don Braid from Calgary Herald. Don, your line is open.
I wonder if you folks, you've given us some hope, some cause for optimism with some of your comments, but I wonder if you could give us more of an overall sense of whether you're through you believe you're through the worst of this by being able to protect communities. Is the worst of the destruction and devastation over with, or can you not guarantee that even at this point? I would,
you're nodding? That's what I would say, yes, yeah. I think that because so much of this is dependent on the weather, we really continue to be dependent on the weather. And I think as all Albertans, we know that that means that certainty is not a feature of any statements at this point. People are working very, very hard. Certainly in terms of public safety, I think we've made great progress in terms of the effectiveness of the evacuation thus far, and that continues to be a focus. In terms of the state of the fire and the consequences of the fire, I think that until we've got it under control, it wouldn't be responsible to make any declarations about how far through the process we are yet.
Do you have a follow-up, Don?
No, that's fine, thanks.
Operator, please put through the next caller.
Your next question comes from the line of Cam Rosowski from Global News. Cam, your line is open.
Hi, yes, sir. I had a technical question for Mr. Morrison and Scott on the use of the water bombers. You mentioned there are 16 water bombers currently in use, possibly more in the future. I wanted to confirm that they're being used right now both to protect neighborhoods and also to combat the fire on the front lines. And secondly, I was hoping you could describe and address the extent to which these bombers are able to keep the fire at bay and what the expectation is for more bombers to arrive in the future.
Sure. Yeah, it's Chad Morrison here. To answer your first question, those tankers were being used to protect homes and support the firefighters on the ground so that they can safely protect the infrastructure and homes there. We continue to do that today. We continue to fly as many air tankers around there that we possibly can safely in that airspace, and they'll rotate throughout the day. They'll continue to because the airport had fire around it last night, we continue to rotate those air tankers through the neighboring air tanker bases and continue to fight the fire. In terms of effectiveness and how it was being utilized, our first priority obviously was the community and the homes, as well as the critical infrastructure. As the fire moved into the forested areas away from the community, we continue to keep those air tankers focused on the critical pieces based on what the direction is coming from the command team. Long term, we continue to bring more air tankers into the province. So right now we have 22 available in the province and continue to bring in an additional 4 from Quebec. And we're working with our partners to continue to get additional ones there. But let me be clear, air tankers are not going to stop this fire. This fire is an extreme fire event. It's going to continue to push through these dry conditions until we actually get some significant rain to help us. The air tankers will help us continue to support resources to support the community and the critical infrastructure there. But I expect this fire to continue to grow over the next number of days, and the air tankers will be put in the most effective places along to support the firefighting efforts in the community.
Operator, please put through the next caller.
Your next question comes from Tanya Zielinski from Upstream International. Tanya, your line is open.
Hi there, thank you. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to everyone working hard there. Fort McMurray is my hometown, born and raised, so it's tragic to watch what's happening there right now. First of all, I want to confirm the size of the fire. Is it now 8,500 hectares?
Sorry, it's 85,000 hectares at this time.
It is 85. Okay, I thought I misheard that. All right. My second question is with regards to the joint oil and gas meeting there. Can you tell me the nature of that conversation?
I had to step out actually, but the conversation was all about a collaborative effort to ensure that the evacuees from Fort McMurray have the best supports that they can. And are well taken care of. We wanted to make sure that food, water, any medical supplies that were required, we knew about it so we could take care of that. We wanted to get some situational awareness on the numbers because, again, as the Premier has mentioned, during a mass evacuation, people have dispersed in many areas. We now have a much better sense of the numbers there. We also wanted to coordinate because the oil and gas industry has got a lot of resources at hand. They're using their own aviation resources to evacuate personnel, and they've offered those as well to evacuate some of the Fort McMurray citizens that are currently in the camps to the north. Right now, there is food, water, and the situation is stable in the north. But as the Premier said, Our strong desire, again, given the unpredictable nature of wildfires, we would prefer to move them south to major city centers where we can give them access to much better emergency social services supports and look after their needs in a better fashion. It'll be done two ways. One is through the aviation resources, and as soon as it's safe to do so, we will provide the gas and the supports to get people on the ground to move through Highway 63 south to those larger communities.
We're going to take two more questions from the phone, and then I'll come back if you guys have a couple of outstanding questions from the floor, and then we're going to wrap up. Operator, please put through the next caller.
Your next question comes from the line of Chris Epp from CTV Calgary. Chris, your line is open.
Two questions for the Premier. Premier Notley, first of all, sorry, I can wait for you to get to the mic. My first question, ma'am, is we've had some other reports from the ground that in addition to the fact that some of the evacuation notices came quite late, there's also talk that many of the police officers who are supposed to be directing people to the proper evacuation centers weren't sure what they were doing and were also quite lacked a lot of direction as well. Are you concerned about what seems to be a lack of coordination on the ground dealing with evacuees?
You know, I think what we have to understand is that in the space of about 48 hours, over 80,000 people were evacuated from a town that essentially has 2 roads out of it. So I think that that what we know is that when that happens, especially in the face of a fire that is traveling at great speeds and huge unpredictability, that people get stressed and it's very, very, very difficult. You know, when I was there yesterday at the Regional Emergency Operations Center, not only met with Darby Allen, who's in charge of the whole thing, but also had a chance to speak with police officials. And I think that given the circumstances, they're coordinating pretty effectively. And when you consider what needed to be done to convince people to get in their vehicles and start driving south, and then of course the absolutely understandable stress that would occur when you get on the road and find that you can't move. I mean, these are scary stories, and everyone would be scared to hear those stories. But I think that the public officials and the emergency responders have done truly a heroic job. They're still doing it. They're still working with very little sleep, and they have my gratitude. And I think that, again, as I say, given the particular circumstances of Fort McMurray, the fact that people have been able to be evacuated as quickly as they have been really is a testament to the strength and the effectiveness of the people on the ground there.
Okay, thanks. And quick follow-up here. Obviously, everyone's pretty busy right now. You probably maybe even forgot today is 1 year since your government came to power here. Can you talk? It's been a rocky year for Alberta the last 12 months. Can you talk about this fire, just in the grand scheme of things, how this, in a year of a lot of lows in Alberta, is this probably the biggest challenge for the province over the last year?
Well, I mean, I think there's, I mean, let's face it, I mean, being told with very little notice that you have to pick up, leave your house, take just a fraction of your possessions, find your family members, and drive to a recovery center 4 hours south without knowing what will be there when you come back. I don't know that there could be anything, very few things that could be more stressful in people's lives. And to have that happen to 80,000 Albertans, I think there's no question that this is a challenge of a scale and a magnitude that we rarely see in this province. On the flip side, as many people have said, and that I think is worth restating, what's also been amazing has been the degree to which people have reached out and helped each other. Whether people from Edmonton doing, trying to volunteer and trying to donate money, whether people opening their homes. Yesterday I met a volunteer in Anzac who's, part of his family was up north. He'd already lost his house, but he wasn't going south. He was serving as a volunteer and putting in, 20 out of 24 hours into trying to organize that reception center. So these are the kinds of stories that we're seeing. We're seeing the story of resilience. We're seeing the story of reaching out to help each other, of supporting each other, of having each other's back. That's the story of our province, and that's the story that I think will win the day, whether it's a year from now or further on.
Take one last question from the phone, and then we'll come back to the floor. Operator, please put through the next caller.
Your next question comes from the line of Allison Martell from Reuters. Allison, your line is open.
Thank you. Going back to communication with the energy companies in the area, can you tell us whether you asked them for help or whether they participated in the actual firefighting?
I think that they have been participating, and I believe that they probably offered as quickly as we asked. But I'll certainly give the specific answer over to Scott to make sure we've got the facts correct.
Right from the start, we've had nothing but cooperation and collaboration from our oil and gas emergency management partners. I think it's important to note that a lot of their employees are from Fort McMurray, so they were actively involved right from the get-go in terms of providing some of their extensive equipment and expertise to the community of Fort McMurray in early days. Once we started leveraging and getting assistance from communities throughout the province, we were able to reinforce with structural firefighters. I'm unsure if we still have some industry firefighters in town, but I can certainly get that answer.
Okay, we'll come back to the floor now. We do have to wrap up soon, but if you guys have urgent questions outstanding, we can take a couple more.
If I can, just one update, just the brief on the search and rescue mission. The individual who was stranded has been found and evacuated by DND in good condition.
Mr. Morrison, we saw a lot of spread yesterday. The fire moved quickly. I wonder if you can put this in context with some of the other large fires we've seen and compare it to the spread of things like the Slave Lake fire, the Chisholm fire. Is this like faster than usual, or is this just regular crazy fire?
To be direct, this is what we would call extreme fire events that would happen in the sort of the most extreme conditions and the rarest of conditions. And you've named some of them: Slave Lake, the Chisholm fire. We also had during 2011 was the fire up in Bichemont north of here, spread 80,000 hectares in a single day. So this is what you see in extreme wildfire events. We continue to expect to see extreme wildfire behavior over the next 2 to 3 days, and we'll continue to, as we continue to see how that materializes, we'll continue to see more information. The good news at this point for today is that the winds continue to push strongly from the northwest, pushing the fire to the southeast, away from the community.
So is that kind of good news for Fort McMurray?
At this point, it's very early in the day to say, and I will always say that because it changes by the hour, but I think that's those conditions of the winds will be good for this section of it. But as the day changes and the fire continues to create its own weather behavior as well, we're going to see continued challenges for firefighters ahead. So we'll see how the day goes and go from there. But we expect extreme fire behavior for the rest of the next coming days.
Would it drastically impact your firefighting abilities if you do have to leave the airport, just because of you won't be able to do the tankers there?
So yeah, good question. We actually so we've pulled our team back last night during the fire event, and now they've redeployed back in and reestablishing the base along with the emergency operations center. And so once the fire has burned past the airport, we can secure it with the municipal firefighters and make sure that it's safe to get that tanker base up and rolling again to support the operations long term.
That fire area up in the northwest and the winds coming that way, is there still threat to the community from that top corner, or is that mostly kind of under control?
So at this point, I don't have the far details on the far corner, but that'll be where our concentrating all of our resources is continuing to protect those homes and the community in there. Again, the map is very rough simply because of all the activity that goes on and how much has changed over the last day. We expect over the coming days, as we continue to get more intelligence and stuff, that we'll have a better definition of where that's at. But we feel that's going to be one of our priority areas to continue to concentrate on.
When are people actually going to be going home? Any ideas from anyone?
Sure.
Do you want to take that one?
Right now, to be clear, in terms of this sort of an emergency management event, we're in the response phase. So we're really, our job is safety, protection of safety of all Albertans, including those first responders out there, protection of residents, protection of critical infrastructure. By doing that and concentrating on that, and however long that takes, it will set the conditions for the next phase, which will be the stabilization and starting to plan the re-entry so people can go back in a controlled and safe environment to their homes. That there is no specific timeline on that, as you were just briefed. We're still dealing with some severe and serious challenges in the response phase.
Do you think it's days, weeks?
There's no timeline at this point in time.
One question about the oil companies putting up people in their work camps is any of this, who's going to pay for it?
Right now, that conversation hasn't come up at all. And it may in the future, but right now that conversation hasn't come up. Our focus is all about safety.
We're going to wrap up there, guys. As you heard the Premier say, there will be another update this afternoon.